Hey everyone, and welcome to the 6th episode of Foulborn Roulette. I spin the wheel, land on Foulborn Rebuke of the Vaal, a sword with a bunch of flat damage and trapped throwing speed. This one's gonna be fun, so consider subscribing, liking, sharing even if you enjoy these videos. It really helps. Let's dive in.
Nothing like a brisk step to start the day.
It's time for a new character, to spend some time on the beach. After completing all of the challenges this league, I will be a keeper for the occasion. I'm leveling for now with ethereal knives for no particular reason until level 12 when I can equip Blade Trap. I have a 20% quality version in the stash. This trap is special in that it has an attack tag instead of a spell tag. Most traps, the vast majority, are spells, but my weapon only has flat added damage and trap throwing speed, so I need a trap with an attack tag. And for now, Blade Trap is the only skill that fits that description. Here you see how they work. You throw a trap and it springs a contraption with 2 blades attached based on your equipped weapons. It rotates 4 times in 4 seconds and then it despawns. Simple enough. It does okay damage, it's definitely not great, but I will be using it throughout the campaign as per usual to get a good idea about the skill and just some overall experience with the playstyle. The damage is very much dependent on your equipped weapons, which must be swords, daggers or claws, so I make sure to keep upgrading them after every act. In boss fights like Piety, traps allow you to preemptively place a bunch of them, making quick work of this event. With the second version of Piety, you can see this even better.
It's been a grand experiment, Shadow. Time we saw the results. You've no idea what's at stake here, Shadow.
On the flip side, clearing with this skill isn't exactly comfortable. I do the first lab, and at this point I feel this character is going to be a decent bosser. I go Saboteur, starting with Born in the Shadows for tankiness. Permanent Blind is huge. It's a great defensive layer and you can see the build ramping up a bit already. Because Blade Trap is considered an attack, reduced cost of attack skills works. I run around with a double Arakaali's Fang for a bit, which was nice and actually summoned spiders. This is a bit of a meme of course, but I just like to try out some things, and maybe for a poison trap in the future. This wouldn't even be horrible. Here's the damage at this point, with dual wielding Arakaali's Fang on the Celestial Sisters. It gives a decent overview of what works and what doesn't. As long as bosses stand still in all my blade traps, damage is good. If they move around, it is CDPS. And after reaching level 64, I can finally equip the Foulborn Rebuke of the Vaal. I would normally explain the item, but what is there to explain, right? My only question was, what does Rebuke actually mean? And apparently it is, quote, express sharp disapproval or criticism of someone because of their behavior or actions. Makes sense, given that the Vaal weren't exactly nice. This is the time in the playthrough that I'm getting rid of all the twink gear and equip some normal pieces instead. This belt, which I can craft a bit on, new shoes, which I kept in unnamed stash tabs with just random good stuff in it, compared to the tree crafting. These are nothing special, but with an invasion bench craft, more than enough for now. I got myself a new 6-link too, and after just this essence, I will take it for now. I just need a little bit of gear to get started, I will worry about upgrades later. This gives me a good opportunity to discuss the gem setup. I linked Blade Trap to increased critical damage, increased critical strikes, obviously I'm going for a crit build here, swift assembly support to get some more traps out without massive less damage multipliers that something like Cluster Trap would give you, charged traps for free frenzy and power charges, and trap and mine damage support, a massive more multiplier. I decided to also equip the Vertex from Uber Adziri. This isn't really good or anything, but at least it has decent stats. I'll replace it later. I will put on some skills in here like Flame Dash, which now costs less mana. I found an old corrupted shield in my stash, which will have to do for now. I set up a cast on damage taken Immortal Call setup supported by Life Tap for some extra defenses. Don't pay attention to the gloves, they're a placeholder. The rings are just for utility for now, and I decided to check the wiki if I can find some other interactions. The blade trap is straightforward enough. The transfigured version doesn't add much to what I wanted to do, as they either require a two-hander or are bleed focused. However, there are more attack-based traps, chat notifies me, primarily Spectral Helix of Trarthus. That thing works like regular Spectral Helix, but then it is a trap and you activate the Spectral Helix after throwing the trap. This hardly has any information available, plus I don't have this skill, and if I want it I will need to do heist. Spectral Throw of Trarthus is another option, but I find it much less appealing, so I decided to keep it relatively simple for now and just stick to Blade Trap and see how far that gets me. I complete 2 more labs, get more AoE and more AoE hits, but I didn't record any of that, and I finish up by killing Kitava. You can clearly see the AoE of the traps is much larger, and the bigger the better. Kitava goes down, it's time for some maps. Keep in mind that we're talking about a Saboteur Blaze Trap character here, but with that said, mapping isn't terrible. Especially in confined spaces, it does just fine. Map bosses in tier 1 die fast, trash does too, it's okay. I craft and automate a bunch of flasks, but forget to include a diamond flask. Why would you, on a crit build? I remove any twink rings for 2 normal ones, fixing most of my resistances. I decide to try out Hand of the Lords, which drops from the new Breach boss, in my mind an excellent choice. It provides you a skill, Will of the Lords, which is a trap. I'm not going to explain this whole thing, Jungro made a great video about a proper build for this, but it does these purple explosions, and while they look pretty cool, there's very little synergy with my build, and I realized my blade traps do way more damage. So after a few maps I decided to just stick to the original plan. Instead, I get myself these new gloves, decent stats, some res, it's not bad. You may spot I have the Sunblast equipped, in theory a fun belt, and I'll be experimenting with this on and off. It provides +2 traps thrown, which is huge, but traps are no longer triggered by enemies, but rather automatically after a certain delay, which at this point simply feels bad. Also, I get way less frenzy and power charges, as those are generated when a monster triggers a trap, and that doesn't happen anymore. I have imported the build-in path of building at this point, and PoB keeps telling me that more flat added damage is the way to go, even at the expense of crit chance, which I find hard to believe, but this is why you will see me slot in and mess around with Awakened added Chaos and Awakened added Cold. Here is a tier 8 or so boss for a bit of reference about how to build plays at the moment, and here is some tier 9 or so regular mapping, in which you can tell the delay of the trap I think, but you can also see clearing in fact isn't too bad. I would say it's actually quite smooth overall. You simply run all over the place, throw a bunch of traps, and if they're close enough they will all trigger at the same time thanks to my ascendancy, and as the Sunblast triggers these things automatically, the build feels more like a self-detonate mine build than a trap build where enemies have to trigger traps. You do notice however that I am barely getting any charges, which first of all is quite detrimental to my crit chance, not getting power charges, and without frenzied charges the build feels a lot worse to play. I then decide, for no apparent reason really, that I want to try a Maven Invitation. These are all tier 16 map bosses as it turns out, I'm level 75. With that in mind, this isn't even bad, but it is for sure a bad idea. After 3 minutes and 40 seconds I managed to kill all of them, but I'm not sure why I just did this, or what I'm actually proving here. The time has come to do some heists, to try and get those Trarthus gems. All of the Trarthus gems drop in heists now these days. They're not exactly common though, especially if you want one specific one. Maybe I'm just unlucky. In between I do the 4th lab, where Izaro damage is okay but nothing special. I get a bomb specialist for more area damage. Blade Trap is an AoE skill, clearly. I roll the exceptional support gem on the Divine Font, which after using it provides an enlightened support. I can never have enough of those in SSF. It's back to heist, where I reveal rooms with gems in them, only to not find the gem I'm looking for. You do get very decent gems for SSF, I will say that. Even 2120 gems. I also find a replica badge of the Brotherhood for 5 endurance charges. Pretty big, until I die, that is. Sag, no badge. I do find Heavy Strike of Trarthus, which is just amazing. Decided to get myself some better gear after that pointless death, and the tree drops this 6 link. That's a nice improvement. I decided to leave heist for a bit and return to mapping. This is a tier 16, I'm able to run these now, and while you're watching this, let's talk a bit about the scaling of the build so far. One of the reasons I went crit is because of the weapon. It has a low base crit, I know, but it also has all damage types and a bunch of flat damage, and I didn't feel I was going to be able to scale either of those damage types, and I also felt that trying to convert these was pointless. So rather than focusing on elemental damage or physical damage or chaos damage, I instead just took generic damage nodes, sword damage nodes, and decided on crit chance so I could scale all of the flat damage on the weapon using crit nodes. To me, that made sense, and in this tier 16 map you can see the build is doing just fine. There's very little reason at this point to play this over any other build, but that is not really the point of this series. Also, we're not done yet. It does beg the question though, what is the point of this build? Is it a mapper? Not really. A bosser? I mean, only if the boss stands still, and even then, I've made several builds this league alone that feel a lot better against bosses. It is not very good in breach events due to the limited time that traps are available. League mechanics in general, it is not great at. At this point, you can play the build, but apart from making a YouTube video about it, I would be hard pressed to recommend this to anyone for any particular reason. On the flip side, I'm having fun still, and again having a somewhat comfy tier 16 mapper, that is a decent result in itself if you see, I think, what kind of weapon I rolled on the wheel. The new patch is live at this point, and it may be just me, but did the nameless seer just enter my map via a lightning bolt? I decided to test my build again versus a Maven invitation, and this one goes a lot better compared to the previous one. Improvements are visibly there. It now takes under 2 minutes. It's still not great, but it is okay. I decided to do another round of gear upgrades. First, I'm getting a good bunch of items from map runners. These mids, pretty good. This shield, pretty sick. This isn't a bad amulet either. A decent helm with tons of life. I collected all the pieces in the stash tab ready to be crafted on. First, this helmet. Some quality, I'm linking it, and it has now decent Eldritch implicits. That is one piece done. Then the gloves, on which I craft Chaos Hybrid resistances. I slam mana, which is unlucky, and again Eldritch implicits. Bleeding, because I have a high crit chance against bleeding enemies, and Intimidate for more attack damage taken. Then the boots, they have great suffixes but mediocre prefixes, so I do suffixes cannot be changed. Hit it with a Field Chaos Orb and I get only one Veiled mod, which is good. I block a common roll like Energy Shield, not sure that does all that much but fine, and I unveil for movement speed. Excellent, that is a very common outcome by the way. I craft life, again slam mana for some reason, apply Eldritch currencies, implicits, and this time avoid ailments and chaos res, and the boots are done. Then this ring, it's a very good base item already, and it has an evasion mod which will be useful very soon. I craft life and it's done. Up next is the shield, hybrid chaos res, I slam plus 2 melee, which is pointless, and after coloring, that's another great item. Here is a new belt, just craft chaos res and we're done. And finally I get this amulet, crit multiplier, decent other stats. It's better than just a bunch of attributes from the Estramantis. I can now remove several spell suppression nodes from the tree. I take the mastery for 20% more energy shield if both rings have evasion, which they do. I get another jewel socket, take a look at the several jewels that I have at this point. I don't really like what I'm seeing, and then I remember I also have a bunch of timeless jewels. I try a bunch of them, but the lethal pride seems the most promising, as it provides a lot of strength for small passive nodes and a bunch of bonuses on notables. They're not all useful, but many of them are. I even have the MTX for this thing, so why not? I do one more craft, this ring. I unveil hybrid chaos res, which is great, block suffixes, and then reroll defenses on the Hordy station, hoping to hit evasion, so that mastery keeps working for the 20% energy shield. On the second try, I get it. It even rolls flat energy shield, which is quite nice. I craft life on there, and this is a good upgrade. Resistances look good at this point as well. I finally get a diamond flask into the build. Sometimes I just forget about these things. I upgrade a few other flasks while I'm at it. I anoint True Strike on the amulet for crit chance in the multi, and I'll call it a day. It's back to heist. Here we are again, looting the blueprints, getting more Trarthus gems that I don't need. It's decent experience though, as long as you don't die. And then, after many blueprints, here it is, Spectral Helix of Trarthus. For some reason, I feel I should have pierced, not realizing these things pierce by themselves. And after that little mistake, which I won't correct for a while, the skill looks like this. It's quite nice, it bounces all over the place and it does a lot more damage than Blade Trap due to the much higher added damage effectiveness. I'm streaming at this point again here on YouTube and over on twitch.tv/Thyworm, and the chat starts to pitch in. PoE suggests to use an Ashes of the Stars because the skill gets more projectile damage based on quality. Here is a map showcase of that situation. The gem at this point is level 15, but you can tell how smooth this is. The Rebuke of the Vaal is swirling all over the place from all the different traps. It looks great, it's pretty clean in terms of visuals, all things considered, and most of all, the damage is great. This all comes with a slight delay because you throw a trap, it triggers, and then the Helix starts spiraling, so the loot all drops behind you, but the damage output is very good, compared to Blade Trap, that is. That is currently my frame of reference, right? That is what I've been playing for the last 20 hours or so. Bossing at this point is fairly comfortable, I would say. I will show you some Baran footage. I only had a tier 15 Baran map at this point, but I think this is very respectable damage. Keep in mind the gem isn't even level 16 at this point. The chat on the stream chimes in with a few more suggestions, such as Wall of Force. Interesting thoughts, but it doesn't do anything. Probably because the skill pierces and you are expected to not pierce. I try another Maven invitation, this time the Elder Slayer Guardians. That's not an easy fight, but it's not much of an issue, although it takes a bit of time. I kill them in just under 4 minutes. In another instance though, like with Drox here, I'm pretty happy with the single target damage. This isn't bad at all. Maybe I'll have a bosser on my hand after all. Then chat says, try Fury Valve. Super fun amulet, splitting projectiles into multiple ones, and to my and others' surprise, this actually works with the skill. At least technically. The projectiles are being split. I can see the potential, but something is missing. It doesn't seem to do all that much, so we ditch this idea. Now, if you're like, hold on a second, just realize that after swapping from Blade Trap to Spectral Helix, I haven't changed anything but the gem, meaning my whole setup, including ascendancy points, are still set to the AoE Blade Trap setup. This will be relevant pretty soon. So I swapped back to regular Spectral Helix, and I think we can all agree this looks a lot better compared to what you just saw. It is at this point I realize I still have a bunch of old, completely pointless, I might add, ascendancy points. So, as I am now a projectile skill, I decide on returning projectiles and a lucky crit. I also included the Beltamer blade, which has great synergy with this build, because this has me dual wielding, meaning I throw an additional trap, plus it has far shot, meaning projectiles deal more damage the more they travel. And these helixes travel a lot, so that is a decent damage multiplier. Time for a little test, and indeed, after the projectiles are done traveling, they return to the position that they came from, in this case, the trap. That's very interesting. I do a bit of experimenting as well with crafts. I decide to put in an Arcanist brand with a few other skills, and I ultimately land on Hydrosphere, which gets constantly hit by projectiles, reducing enemy resistances, Flame Ball, which adds flat added fire damage to projectiles, and Assassin's Mark for that crit chance. It's pretty convenient casting all of this with a single button. The tree provides this amazing chest piece. I can really use an upgrade. I decided to use a few tailoring orbs on it, and I don't really roll anything good unfortunately. I 6-socket it, 6-link it, craft intelligence on it because I need that to equip the item itself, put Eldritch Implicits on it, and this is a great chest piece. Almost 3000 evasion and 600 energy shield. I test if the Arcanist brand is working, and it all seems to be good. Several grafts are tested too, but anytime the graft states that you have to do damage, or you have to crit, it doesn't work, because I'm not doing the damage or I am not critting, my traps are. This tornado just isn't doing all that much, from Dance in the White for example. Overall, mapping and damage though, it's incredibly solid. Also the Maven Invitation with the Arcanist brand and all the flying spiraling things, that works. It's very satisfying and the damage output is definitely good. It is a massive improvement over what I was doing before with Blade Trap. Here you see a longer section in Toxic Sewers, which is a good map because of all the projectiles. They're constantly bouncing off all the walls, doing damage each time that they hit. And all in all, I would have been happy if I left it here. If you like this playstyle, you could just play this. It is a decent all-rounder at this point. It does everything fairly well at a reasonable pace. And this is pretty SSF-viable as well. You don't have to have this weapon that I have in order to play this. It doesn't excel at anything really, but it doesn't need to perhaps. Now that I feel the build is mostly online, it is time for a bit of limit testing. Here is a 40% Delirious map. Monsters have very significant damage reductions here, but the build holds up pretty well. My gems are still leveling, I'm around level 92 at this point, and with that in mind, this isn't bad at all. Everything works as advertised, and with the new chest piece and some other upgrades, plus increased blind effect on the passive tree, the build is deceptively tanky. Endurance charges would be the icing on the cake, but I don't see a decent way to generate those at the moment. Still, I don't die at all in this map, which is not an easy map to run. It is at this moment a guy called Dragonware Studios enters the chat and says, "Gotta use Fury Valve, that makes this thing amazing." And I'm like, we tried that, it really didn't seem all that great. But then I quickly realized, I tried that with the wrong ascendancy nodes and I didn't really change anything else to make it work, like extra projectiles. So he's like, equip that thing, drop the pairs, see what happens. So let me show you what happens on another 40% Delirious map for comparison.
Come on now, don't go all day.
This is pretty insane actually. It immediately reminded me of Power Siphon Miner Trickster, which also used Fury Valve, and that build was nuts. I spec out of the pierce, it's not required after all, and this just feels so good to play all of a sudden. Projectiles fly everywhere and they do tons of damage due to far shot, long shot, gem quality and added damage effectiveness that gets better and better the more the gem levels up. It looks very cool as well. I complete the whole map, decide to slot in greater multiple projectiles, as that would mean 7 projectiles coming out of each trap at the cost of a bit less damage, and that is exactly what is happening over here. There are some intricacies as to how many of these returning projectiles can hit and overlap. There has to be apparently 0.225 seconds between them in order to do damage. In other words, they don't shotgun if they all arrive at the same time. But I don't think you need to know all of that to see that the skill does a ton of damage and has a ton of potential. Whether the greater multiple projectile support is worth it, that is a little debatable, and in an attempt to settle that debate, I try several Elder fights and time the completion time. For clearing in maps, GMP just feels very good, as you do enough damage to clear anyway. For single target, given the skill can't really shotgun, you may be better off replacing GMP with, in my case, flat added damage. And the latter is indeed the case. After several tryouts doing Elder, it is slightly better, at least in my build, to be using a damage gem rather than GMP.
Rot, spoil, and fester.
Another improvement for even more projectiles and damage is Sniper's Mark instead of Assassin's Mark. I'm running several tests on Elder to see how various other setups perform, but whether you take extra projectiles in or out, it doesn't seem to matter all that much for single target at least. I ran an Uber Elder fight as well, which is very comfortable. It's a little slow, single target damage despite the number of projectiles you see flying all over the screen is okay, but it isn't Flamewood Totems, let's say. But the character is quite tanky, and clearing the screen of portals is easy to do. The fight took about 4 minutes. The Elder fights on average around 2.5 minutes for reference. For good measure and for the video, I ran a tier 17 map as well. You can run a good number of modifiers on a build like this, as damage is fairly high and you don't care about reflect, for example. For running these comfortably, however, I feel I am too squishy. So I go back to something else that is comfortable, such as Maven boss rushing. I reach level 94, decides to get Greater Volley instead of Greater Multiple Projectiles. Both do the same thing for this build, but Greater Volley has a more advantageous less damage modifier, saving me a few % less damage overall. My main skill reaches level 20 and I decide to also just run a map again with the Ashes of the Stars rather than Fury Valve. Projectile coverage is a bit less, but damage is significantly higher. After some more consideration, I don't think in the end these two options are vastly different, so I do stick with the Fury Valve in the end. The number of projectiles flying everywhere is also fun to look at. These bosses though, with just Spectral Helix, they do die pretty fast. Lovely people, this is the end of the episode, as there isn't much more to explore on this character. I'm not going to attempt bosses or Ubers. I think it is a decent showcase on how to do something useful with this Foulborn unique. It is a very fun mapper, and once again I enjoyed this journey, but I feel I've achieved all that I realistically can do. This will be a temporary end for the Foulborn series as Path of Exile 2 launches in a few days. It's a little hard making content for that at the moment, before launch I mean, without any of the tools available, so I'm currently just playing some other games. You may even see a video of that. Starting Friday, however, I will register my PoE 2 journey for your enjoyment. I do hope you will enjoy that. And after I'm done playing PoE 2, which may or may not be soon, depending on how I feel about the state of the game, there is a very decent chance I will return to PoE 1 just like I did last league, for potentially more Foulborn runs. I'm having a lot of fun, these videos are doing really well, I just want to play something else at this point. So, with that said, please don't forget to subscribe, like and share the video if you want. Thanks for watching and, once again, making it to the end. See you soon, love you all, bye bye.